I'd like to now ask Ms. Angela Stanzel of the European Council of Foreign Relations to give a presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you to you for inviting us and hosting us here today. It's my first time in Westminster. I'm really thrilled to be here. So I work for the European Council on Foreign Relations, but I wrote my PhD about China-Pakistan relations. So I will also talk about Balochistan today in the context of Pakistan-China relations. So Balochistan is highly important to the Pakistan-China relationship, as we just heard before, because Balochistan is where China invested like nowhere else in Pakistan, in particular in infrastructure. The construction of the deepwater port of Gwadar, giving China access to the Persian Gulf, has in fact already started around 16, 17 years ago. The plan has been in the pipeline even longer. And you have also mentioned Karakoram, which dates even a few decades earlier back. So Balochistan is now also the main stage for China's new Silk Road. It's planned to establish mega infrastructure network projects all over Asia, up to Europe, also passing by Africa and even the Middle East. The CPEC, as you mentioned. And again, nowhere China has committed as much investment as in Pakistan in frame of the Silk Road. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor the commitment of China for this corridor is around $46 billion. There is no single investment in the whole Silk Road scheme that is even comparable to this. And equally, of course, now, as we also heard, CPEC lies now at the center of the conflicts in Balochistan. And because of these conflicts, Chinese investment has often been under attack too. So we've seen the insurgencies by separatists and autonomy-seeking Baloch groups, but also increasing attacks by Islamist militant groups, etc., etc. And now CPEC in particular has become a target for those domestic groups or the political opposition in Pakistan and in particular in Balochistan. So far it seems that CPEC is further fueling the tensions in Balochistan rather than mitigating them in any way. Firstly, the core problem is so far that CPEC might exploit Balochistan, as you pointed out, rather than develop it, while the establishment, the government, the military, the business elite, and also other provinces actually are looking to benefit the most of it, while the local people do not benefit from it at all. And this feeling is not new. This feeling of Baloch people to be disadvantaged is not a new feeling. So CPEC has reinforced this feeling, and the anti-government or anti-establishment emotions. So the problem with CPEC relates to the traditional feeling of the Baloch people to be left behind. Islamabad argues, when it's confronted with this kind of concerns, that the region has much potential to become a major trading hub, because it could be a major driver for employment in particular. And Islamabad is not wrong to say that. There is a potential. We also heard just now how many natural resources Balochistan alone has. But again, the Baloch people fear that the $46 billion investment from China will be distributed unequally and will fail to benefit the local communities who in fact need it the most. The problem on the Chinese side, meanwhile, is that so far, everywhere where we look, also when we just look at the Silk Road in itself, Chinese investment only focuses on this kind of monumental infrastructure, and it's not targeted at rural development, for example. And because of the special relationship between Beijing and Islamabad, all these deals regarding CPEC, and before it was Gwadar and before it was Karakorum, these deals are made between Beijing and Islamabad. The locals have no role in the decision-making process. The biggest failure here is, of course, lies with Islamabad, not to have included at any point the local people in this decision-making process and to give the local people some kind of voice. Islamabad so far has also failed to include local people in the newly created jobs, because they are new jobs. Some estimations talk about 2 million jobs that could be created within Pakistan in frame of CPEC alone. This might be exaggerated, but nevertheless, the potential is there. There are jobs in construction, there are jobs in engineering and in IT, and etc., etc. The dilemma is, in particular when it comes to Balochistan, is that there is a lack of skilled and educated people to fill these jobs. So Pakistan, or the government of Pakistan, would first need to invest in education and in training, just to start with. The second point is the security dilemma, especially. So Balochistan has witnessed regular insurgencies and also military campaigns, which is traditionally a conflict between Islamabad and the local groups. But the battle now seems to have reached a new level, also because of China. The resistance against CPEC resulted in more attacks against Pakistanis, non-Baluch in Balochistan, Pakistani workers, for example, who have been sent there to construct, and also Chinese workers. And even long before CPEC has been announced, there was this resistance. So when Gwadar, the construction on Gwadar started, also the attacks against Chinese workers started. The attacks on Chinese workers peaked in around 2007, also in relation to the Red Mosque incident. And then the Pakistani military got much harder and to prosecute these Islamist groups, in particular when it came to kidnapping or killing of Chinese workers. So it calmed down again. But since CPEC has been announced, we see again increasing attacks on all sorts of construction workers, and also the infrastructure in itself. China always reacts in the same way. When this happens, it puts Islamabad and the military under high pressure to solve it. Doesn't matter how they solve it, just solve it. So in order to protect CPEC, the Pakistani military has significantly increased its effort and allocated a special security force, a division of the Pakistani army. From what I heard, it's up to 30,000 soldiers so far to protect CPEC. And these 30,000 soldiers are just there to protect CPEC. So this military presence then again fueled the tensions even more and the resistance in Balochistan. And the problem that we see here at the moment is that the lines on both sides are hardening. The Baluch separatists groups have vowed to resist CPEC, any CPEC projects, claiming that this is a further exploitation of their resources and also their rights. Meanwhile, Islamabad vowed to continue with CPEC at all costs. The military has branded those who oppose CPEC as traitors. And this brings me to my third and final remark or point, the human rights situation in Balochistan. This is why we are here. And because Balochistan is so important to Pakistan due to Chinese investments, the military hits back increasingly harder whenever there is any kind of resistance against CPEC. And the Pakistani military will likely also continue to intensify its military operations in Balochistan and try to suppress any critics of local groups, using any means necessary. And there's no one to object to that except the Baluch themselves, so far, and us, maybe. So the government and military have already been implicated with human rights violations in Balochistan. Baloch people are prevented from speaking out loud. They are partly prevented from traveling to events like this to speak in foreign countries on the human rights situation. But it goes, of course, much further than that. Journalists and activists are being harassed, abducted, and sometimes killed in Balochistan. There are forced disappearances and raids against alleged separatists. And these forced disappearances in particular have increased in recent years. And then the national militants respond in kind. And there we have the vicious circle that we see happening right now in Balochistan. Human Rights Watch has accused Pakistan's security forces of unlawfully killing and forcibly disappearing suspected Baloch militants and opposition activists. And following last year's major attacks in Quetta, last year, August, September, an EU parliamentarian called for the international community to take notice of a situation created due to years of concerted government use of extremist groups as proxies against journalists, political activists, and intellectuals. The danger is now that the province has entered this spiral of conflicts, this vicious circle, but the ones who are suffering most from this is not the Pakistani army, it's not the Pakistani government or even the Chinese workers, it's the Baloch people who at the same time have the least power to defend themselves or to fight for their rights in any way. My very last point to conclude, because I also put it in the title, China's Dilemma. China's dilemma is obviously that Pakistan seems to be a sort of a model for whatever it is going to do in the rest of the world in terms of Silk Road, in terms of infrastructure development. Even if we want to talk about neo-colonization, this too, Pakistan is it's a model, and the problems we see in Pakistan are already happening everywhere else. The problem that China goes into these countries, doesn't invest in local communities, and creates more conflicts either between the government and local communities or also with China and the country itself and so forth. So what to do if China doesn't act on human rights violations and so on and so forth? Then it lies with us. It lies on Europe, for our part, to take notice of these developments and constantly address them as we do today. Thank you.